Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, After the Sale, How Do Vendors and Customers Partner for a Better Handoff, brought to you by the FPSA Baking Council. My name is Elena Sierra, and I'm the Director of Networks and Special Projects for FPSA. I would now like to introduce today's presenter, Chad Larson, Vice President of Manufacturing at Mel-O-Cream Donuts International. In Chad's 25 plus years of baking experience, he has worked in a diverse set of baking businesses from donuts to pizza. Chad established a career in process development and team development with many larger and smaller bakery companies. Chad has also been responsible for many significant capital acquisitions from inception to installation. These diverse experiences have provided him a toolbox of resources that deliver results in the baking operations. Now I'd like to hand it off to Chad.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for that introduction. You can go to the next slide if you would, please. So I know she did a great job of introducing me, and this is who I am. But I'll tell you, the thing about this process and this presentation is, let's keep it informal. First of all, this is more about the tools and ideas. And some of you folks may have been in the industry is in operations capacity, and I don't want to go over things you probably already know, but what I want to do is take a little bit of time to refresh some of these concepts for you and understand how you can apply these tools and ideas into your sales technique and your follow-up to these customers. Because as a person that's bought a lot of large capital acquisitions, it's really important to have these points brought up and utilized by the people, because what happens is over time is that the projects take on a life of their own, and after you're done selling and walk away, a lot of times they don't go the way that you always thought they should, or the team doesn't have the resources available that you thought they did, and you end up having to spend more time, energy, and potentially money to help support the project. And if you do some things up front ahead of that and really set the team up for success longer term, and then do some quick follow-ups and resource planning around that, it could probably save you some time and money as a vendor. And I think that that's important, especially in today's world. We all are so project sensitive and time sensitive and cost sensitive on both sides. And I think that if we took the time to do this little bit extra going into it, it would save a bunch of headaches. The other thing is these concepts are universal. Again, I've worked from bagels to donuts to pizzas, for crying out loud. I mean, we top pizzas, and that's a completely different animal than a lot of things, but the fundamentals were still the same, and we applied the same tools, whether it was one piece of equipment or another. It could be as simple as a single box machine all the way up to as complex as a full sheeting line. And the process and concepts are the same. So they're universal in that sense. And again, if you've been in the industry, you've probably been exposed to them to some degree, but it's just, again, replanting the seeds. The other thing is a vendor, you get exposed to a lot more people in the industry, and I think the industry as a whole would benefit from these concepts. It's surprising how many bakeries I've walked into, and frankly, I've built a career on it, going into these businesses and finding dysfunctional training programs, dysfunctional teams, because they didn't have structure, and they didn't have the fundamental things that give them the ability to manage the process and take these things on. And it gets even more compounded when you start to put new projects in place or new equipment in place, and the infrastructure is not there to support that. So this concept also helps with that. So as you guys go around and do your jobs and introduce these new products to your customers, you're planting seeds. And in the industry, I think over time, those people take those tools and use them somewhere else, as I've done, and it'll become a really nice way for us to help the industry become better at what they do. The car industry and the real technical jobs out there as far as manufacturing things, and maybe even your own manufacturing facilities, probably have a lot of this in place already. Again, maybe not as repetitive as this in some of the custom equipment, but when you're doing real repetitive construction or real competitive repetitive jobs, it becomes much more standard. So I think you guys can do this really well. The other thing is the customers look at you guys as subject matter experts. So when you bring these concepts to the table, they listen because there's something there. You do this for a living. You've been through more plants than most of them probably ever seen. So the ideas that come out of your groups tend to carry weight if given the right context and the right support around it from the beginning. So, but I'm also realistic about this. I've been that group that, you know, when you walk in and you hear a vendor telling you to do something, you're a little skeptical because it's not really what you've done in the past. So I don't know that every company will embrace these ideas, but even if you start to set some seeds out there and they start to utilize them a little bit, I think, again, over time, everyone's life will become a little bit better. So these are tools that I've used and been successful with in my career that have afforded a lot of improvements to processes and really changed the game for some of our businesses. So next slide, please. So real quick history on the company I'm with now. I know a lot of people probably never heard of Mel-O-Cream Donuts International, but it's an older company. It's been around 90 years. We've got just over 105 team members. Actually, we're expanding that a little bit with some of the new businesses we've taken on. And it's a real nice donut manufacturing. We make 3 primary products, kind of 4 if you think of finishing some of the products, but we make frozen dough, pre-fried products, a couple bread items, and then we do fully finished, ready to eat products. So 3 primary with the bread kind of thrown in there a little bit. We bought the company in 2019, my father, brother, and I, in December 2nd, and it's been owned by the same person, and another person joined him a while, but for 90 years, this company's essentially been family owned by one gentleman and his brother-in-law before he passed. So they brought up the opportunity to buy the company, so we took it on. The building's 23 years old. We have about 250 SKUs. We sell to large grocery store chains in around a 600-mile radius around Springfield, Illinois. So we have a couple of our own trucks, and then we use a lot of third-party carriers. And we've built a reputation over the years as a company that is known for its quality and service. So it's a nice little piece of business. And just a little background on what Mel-O-Cream Donuts is, in case you've never heard of it. But it's been a fun opportunity to own something and take a whole new different role rather than just the VP or plant manager that I've been in for so many years. Next slide, please. So as you walk into these opportunities, I've built a lot of relationships with these folks out there that sell this equipment, and one of the things that I always look at these scenarios is it's a courtship. It's a long process, and for those of you that sell equipment or ingredients into businesses, you know for a fact that's the case. But part of that process, in my mind, is for you as the salesperson or you as your company to get in and start to really know the culture, know the team. When you're doing this, you're almost getting married in a sense. This is a long-term relationship. If the customer or the person's buy your product and become a customer, you're there for a long time. And that equipment, some of our equipment, like I said, is 23 years old in our plant. And we still have those relationships with those folks that sold it to us. So it's a long-term relationship, and you need to look at it that way. So you need to know the team. You need to know their capabilities. It's good to understand. I think as you walk in, people put up a presentation of what they are, but over time you realize it probably isn't exactly the way they presented it to you. The resources come and go, and it's not always as cut and dry as it seems. And the other thing is that you get to know the people. I'd say really find that connection that you have. I'm kind of a people person, and I'm not a really shy guy, so I tend to find a person I connect with in some manner. Usually it's through a fishing story or some story that gets a connection made with somebody. But that connection's beyond the project, and as I get that personal relationship built with these people, I find folks that give me the real details. What's really going on in the organization? It's not to air dirty laundry. It's to understand what's really happening and who the players are and where the resistance might come from or is being felt within the project. So I think as you start to build this relationship and you do the courtship, take the time to really get to know the people. And there's going to be, the idiosyncrasies amongst the team that you're going to realize you have to navigate through, and the politics that go on in the businesses, big or small. I've had them in every organization I've been in. And knowing that and having that understanding and who you can pull aside and get some real information so you can better navigate through those pitfalls is going to help you. You need to understand their depth of experience within their team. The teams are not all created equal, and been blessed in my career to have had a really good group of folks that were able to give us a lot of background in other areas and other businesses, and some were applicable to our specific manufacturing and some weren't. But the diversity of understanding in that group was really important because it brought to the table different ideas that may not have been pursued before that. So Having that knowledge going into it, I know that's a big ask and it takes a lot of time and resources, but when you're talking some of these projects that are in the multi-million dollars, I think it's money and time well spent getting to know the team. And sometimes it's offsite. It's not even necessarily on the floor in the heat of the moment or in these project meetings. It's, hey, let's go have a beer, or hey, let's go have a dinner or something with some of these guys that are a little less formal and get some background on this. You find that they open up a little more and you'll get a better understanding of the process. I did a presentation a few years ago talking a lot about the partnership and the design aspect of the equipment and listening to each other as you design these things. I can't emphasize that enough. I think that these scenarios become a two-way street and need to be really respected in that front. It can't just be a one-way street where they're telling you or you're telling them. It will never function. And I've had vendors that were that way, that sold very specific equipment, and it was a challenging relationship. And frankly, if we had other options, we probably would go different directions just because of those types of scenarios. And I really encourage that interaction. And it starts prior to the installation. So once you get the contract and you got the sale and you're going through the design phase and you're doing design reviews, you've got to be really open with everybody. You have to have that communication, engage at multiple levels in the organization, and definitely encourage them to do the same. Our most successful launches, and I'll speak for Palermo's, we did several major projects, and our successful launches within the projects involved people from the manufacturing floor, just team members that actually went on the FAT. So as the Vice President of Manufacturing, responsible for signing off on the acquisition and the delivery of the project, I didn't go on the FATs. I didn't go to one single FAT, including the fun ones over in Europe. Instead, we sent the people that needed to be there, the people that were going to do the training, the ones that were going to write the manuals, the ones that were going to do the things that made a difference in the installation to make it go off as successful as it needed to be. It wasn't about pride or the fact that we get to travel or do those things. We sent the people that matter because we needed to deliver a project. And I would really be remiss if I didn't tell you to encourage your team to do that, or the people you're selling into to do that. I know it's a big pride thing, and a lot of folks look at those as opportunities and perks to the job. They need to see that the value is really in having the right people at those things. And I think I tell a tale all the time about the Emperor of No Clothes, or the Emperor's New Clothes isn't that old. I think it's a Dutch tale. I know one person on the call that's Dutch, and I think that it goes that the Emperor was approached to get new clothes, and these shysters came in and they said, hey, we're going to make these new clothes, and the clothes, they had no intention to make it. They said that the clothes were so great that they were going to be invisible to the fools because he was having a hard time relationship with the peasants. And when it's all said and done, they didn't put any clothes on him. He just walked around naked. And finally, some little kid says, look, he doesn't have any clothes. And everybody didn't want to say anything because they didn't want to look the fool. I think you have to be that brave child that says, look, this is a bad plan. You need to be able to have those tough conversations with the people and tell them that they don't have clothes. They're the fools. They're the ones that are fools if they don't listen. And I know it seems like you're overstepping your bounds in that sense, but it's critical at times. And I think it over time will show the integrity of you and your organization, and it will build strength into the relationship that you have with these folks that are buying this equipment from you. You have to call out these project time overruns or these cost creeps earlier versus later. Time is money. It's going to lean in on your credibility, and I tell you, as a vendor, I can tell you, I know people that have moved jobs and they've changed career paths, and what goes with them is their integrity, their personal integrity. The name of the company stays with the previous company they're with, but when they move from this job to that job, and I know people that I'll go to a new company because I trust and know the person selling from that business. So it's important to have that ability to do that tactfully, but yet still be honest and sometimes even brutally honest in this process. Because if you do not, you're all going to fail. And when one fails, if they fail, you fail, or if you fail, they fail. So it just doesn't go well all across the board. It's mission critical that you share that information sooner versus later. Next slide, please. So you got the sale, you're going after the initial installation, and some of the things that I think that the people really miss the mark on as we walk into these meetings, and a lot of times it's a one-sided conversation, or there's a lot of people trying to get their points out. I encourage the smart people in the room, the ones that really understand how these go and have done it more than most, and that would be the folks selling it in, because you do this every day for a living, and you've got project people that do this for a living and are degreed in project management or engineering, is I think you get to seek to understand. And what I mean by that is you really have to ask better questions. Take nothing for granted, spend the time to listen, and even if you know the answer, ask the right question, because what's going to happen is you're going to get in a room of folks and they're going to think they have the answer, and you're going to realize that's the wrong path because you've seen it, because you've done this multiple times. You need to help ask better questions and lead them to the right answer. That way they walk out of there going, that was their idea. They're all in, they're totally engaged in it, and it works better for everybody. If you just tell them the answer, it will be resistance a lot of times. They'll tell you they know better, they know their team better, they know the process better, they know everything about their business better than you do. They probably do in most cases, but in this circumstance, in the project that you're dealing with, they need to feel that they're coming to the conclusion, but you need to lead them there a lot of times because it's yours to deliver as much as theirs. And I think you need to pace the process. Really spend the time to understand the team ahead of this, and then work with the team to get through the internal pressures. They're feeling like you are in every project, that there's these pressures that come about. And I think that a lot of times we get so much pushback from our internal or external components that we miss the fact that something's moving and we're not realizing, or we're not calling it out because it's so much pressure. We don't want to look like the fool, internally or externally. So I think that there's a good opportunity there for the pace to work, the pace of work, the pace of communication, and all these things. It kind of isn't a steady flow. It's got to go up and down based on the needs. You guys do this for a living again. You've got to leverage your knowledge in this process, and you've got to make the connections that gives you the credibility, because your credibility in this point in the process during the installation, your credibility will be the one that's tested. And again, when you have a credible outcome of this and you've been honest and upfront with them all the way, even if the project moves a little bit and it's not on budget and it's maybe not on time, they're still going to look at you as a valuable vendor because you were communicating with them properly, you were giving them the insight that they needed, you tried to help them where they could, and they'll, in retrospect, in post-project, it'll come out that there was good partnership there. And I think that's on you to make sure that happens. Don't take anything for granted, as I said early on. A lot of times these connections that you'll find, and you'll get into it more, especially as you do the install, is in your training group or your maintenance technicians. Those are the guys and gals that you really want to get in and start to know a little bit more, versus the project leads and the engineering guys and gals. This is where you're going to get into really building those relationships for the long term, and being able to pick up the phone and ask what's really going on in those deals when you're not there, so you can see what's going on behind the curtain. But again, you'll be able to help them guide through the process. And keep in mind, as you get these connections, be real cautious not to betray their confidence. These people are going to tell you things, and they're going to be guarded. And if you go right away and say, well, Jane Doe said this or John Doe said that, you're betraying their confidence. And I've seen it fall apart before, and then all of a sudden the door shuts and you don't have that resource anymore. So be very thoughtful in how you approach that information that you're given, and utilize it. But yet you still need to make sure that it gets used. So very, again, fundamental it seems, but I think these points a lot of times just need reinforcement. And as a person that's bought a lot of equipment, I look for those relationships with these people, because I think there's a lot of value in it long term. And then you got to get the team involved at all levels, get the operators involved, get the people involved, spend time with them. Heck, it's great to take them lunch once in a while. I know there's big budgets that you have to meet and everything, but just getting them all around the table and breaking bread with them, you'll find that a lot of this stuff breaks down, and the walls that you'll see out there come apart, and they'll one of the quickest ways to a person's heart is right through their stomach. So never hesitate to do that. And I'm not just trying to get free meals to people, but I think you're going to see the benefit of it as well. I've seen vendors bring in little gifts, hats, and different things to people, not logoed from them, but just things, project, whatever you called it, have hat made up or have a shirt made up, and give it to the people that are front line running this thing. And what happens is those people start to really engage in the project, and it gets them their buy-in. there's a lot of dynamics in the floor level that may or may not play well into a project, but the more you can get them engaged into it from your perspective and just supporting the team, even if you build $100 or $200 in the project and you go have t-shirts printed that have their slogan or their logo on it with a slogan for the project, it goes a million miles, trust me. And I've only seen that done a couple times, but I know for a fact it was really impactful. So next slide, please. So there's a couple fundamental tools that I'm going to propose that you understand and maybe take a little time to research for yourselves. I'm not going to get into the nuts and bolts of them, but I want to share some ideas with you. First of all, you more than likely selling anything into a business will have some type of spec sheet or some type of manual or something for starting a line. These are often written very technical, written more towards the maintenance and the technical service side of the business versus the operators and the folks doing it. I've seen them written both ways, but usually even when they try to attempt it to write it for the floor level, it doesn't come off well. It's too complicated. There's more pages than there needs to be. There's often not enough pictures, and I'll talk more about that in some of the next components, but I think you need to really look at how you have those things written. And you need to get the team to find usefulness out of them so they pull them out of their face. You know, they're something that could be leveraged strong or very firmly. There's three things I'm going to talk to specifically and in a couple add-ons, but the first thing is standard operating procedures. And most of you probably heard of this. This is a pretty basic piece. It really leverages your operator manual. It should ask some questions. It's almost like a small playbook for the equipment. And then you get into the SOCs. This gets a little more granular. It's a lot more specific to the product and process, and it captures your normal process settings. We'll get into more detail on these in a second. And the last one that's really a long-term endeavor is troubleshooting guide. Now this becomes very specific to the details, and it's very specific to products and processes. But these are the list of usual suspects. So what went wrong and where to look. So it gets really technical when you build into those. So let's talk a little bit about each of those real quick. Next slide, please. So SOPs are, again, standard operating procedures. Again, your owner's manual or your operations manual on steroids. They need to be really, really visual. We're dealing with most facilities, like I'm sure mine and every other facility I've been in, your team members are 18 years or older, most of them older than that by a considerable amount at the operator level. And as an adult, we learn differently than we did as a child. We could sit in front of a child and give them theory and concept, and they could absorb it like a sponge. Adults, not so much. I have a box of crayons in my office, as a matter of fact, and the team members of mine gave it to me with a stack of paper because I always told them I need you to draw me a picture. And that's kind of what I'm saying with this is you get into this, really leverage your technical group to build this manual, helping them build this manual at the plant level, and utilize a lot of visual aspects. And keep in mind the language side of it. As I spoke, Palermo, 70% of its population at Palermo was non-English speaking. Actually more than that, almost 85%, 70% of it was Hispanic. About 15% of it was Burmese. Now, I don't expect you to have translators on staff and to do this, but keep in mind that if you can illustrate it with a picture, it's pretty much universal. It's going to be a lot easier for them to understand than being able to read the actual manual in English or SOP, even if they get to that point. So you try to use as many pictures as possible. And I said that before, and I'll say it over again and over again. Did a lot of screenshots. And if you do this right, if you have an HMI, you can get your programmers to screenshot the HMI pages for you. And even if you took those on a disk to the company you're selling to, and here's all your HMI screens on a PDF or some form that they can just cut and paste that into a manual and then draw arrows on top of it to show where to push buttons. Way easier for them than having to go out and take pictures or try to extract that themselves. So a little bit of this forethought and a little bit of thinking around this will help expedite this process quite a bit. You know, I can't emphasize enough, the language is a barrier in a lot of these businesses. I see it in my business today. I see it in other businesses in the past. My last two companies that I worked for were primarily Hispanic. So you always will face those challenges, but as we go through this process and we set them up for success, their jobs are going to become easier, and they're going to, again, back to what adds value to a business and you buy these pieces of equipment is really the person and company you're dealing with. The other thing I tell people all the time is, and I use this for a long time, it hit me a long time ago, is you build these programs out and you start to put them together, you start to build a common language. And I don't mean like English, Spanish, I mean like calling this widget a widget, not a thingamadoodad. So everybody starts to use common words. And I always use the story. I went back in the, dating myself a little bit, there's this movie Days of Thunder that had Tom Cruise and he was an auto race car driver for NASCAR. And he got out of the car one time after it wouldn't run, and he just throws the key, throws his helmet at the thing and starts screaming at the mechanics that he doesn't know what's wrong with it, just doesn't turn right. Later in the movie, he's talking about, how the steering suspension system needed to be changed. And they started to create a language together because they communicated better. And I say these manuals and these things that you build out, or the team needs to build out that you can support, become a common language. So when they tell you something's wrong, you understand the words they're using, they understand the words you're using. And boy, does it get quicker for everybody internally and externally to be able to go back and diagnose problems and solve problems, especially in the installation aspect, because that's so new to them and they have no idea what, may or may not have any idea what the nomenclature is for these different pieces of equipment. But as you can build this thing out, walk in more ready to present this to them, the faster they're going to be able to start using words that make sense to you and your team so you can fix problems. And that's what comes out of this process. The SOPs are the first layer. So this is the first thing that they should start to build. And again, it leverages your operations manuals very firmly. So helping them set that up is going to set them up for success. Next slide, please. SOCs are the next layer. This becomes a little more detailed. So I often say that, this is like a jump off point. And you walk up to a line, it's specific to a product and process. So as they start to run, let's say in my plant, we're running ring donuts with a piece of equipment. I need to know where to start the line and kind of base settings for that, if you will, or a jump off point. That's what the SOCs are. It could be, it's more about the nuts and bolts of how do you make this work and what settings to use. Well, the SOPs are more about turn this on, have this on the line, very generic, high level, one layer above that. You get in the SOCs, you're getting into, okay, now we've got this. Now what's the settings supposed to be? Where's that jump off point? And sometimes it's as simple as it's on or off. And sometimes it's more complex, and then it's going to tell you it should be within this range. Now, that becomes fundamentally critical for a lot of reasons, because seasonality of products and processes, especially in some of these bakery operations, there's some huge fluctuations. Not every building is air conditioned. I'm fortunate to have an air conditioned facility now when it's working, but it's something that you will see changes seasonally, and it's a dynamic process. So giving them seasonality, so temperature in the room is 70 degrees to 80 degrees, you're going to use these settings. It's a complex setup. This is something that takes a lot of time and trending over time. The training of this, this is used heavily in training. So when we get into the point where we're showing folks how to do this, I always laughed. I said, I want to be able to walk in the room and run the line just like an operator would. That's what this allows you to do. I can walk up to each setting and I know where to go on the screen and what to set it at, because there's a range and it tells me this is kind of the normal and here's how far it can go either direction from there. Once I have those across the line, I can walk in and set it up to some degree and then know to tweak it a little bit with a little bit of understanding of the process. So this becomes a very, very powerful tool. Complex, takes time. This is probably much longer than building an SOP. This one takes a lot of time and trending to get those settings right. And the other thing is it changes over time. Now, not only do you have the seasonal changes often, but you'll see also, for instance, I had a reciprocator on a process line for a pizza process, and what we found over time was the standard range was pretty tight, and it started to get wider and wider and wider to make it work. And what we realized was there were linear bearings in there that were starting to fail. When they got to a certain point, we knew those linear bearings needed to be replaced, because if you didn't, it was going to have catastrophic failure and the thing would be down for a while. So all of a sudden, these become to the point where they're so precise and they're so well done that as it trends out this direction or another direction, something mechanically is wrong. So all of a sudden your SOCs are outside of their normal and you go, hold it, time out, something's not right here. Why? Is there something mechanical driving it? Is there some dough process driving it? What's the diagnostics to this change? Because we know it runs in the standard operating condition. That's a powerful tool. And I don't think a lot of companies ever drive to that end. I will speak to Palermo's. We walked in and we started off with just standard operating procedures. Within 3 months, we wrote our SOCs. The SOCs drove to troubleshooting guides. When I first walked in, we were making, yielding probably 30 to 40% of the crust coming off the process. By the time I left the organization 7 years later, now mind you, I was only involved in it for less than 1 year in the setup of this process. This took on a life of its own amongst the team. And before you know it, they're producing, I think it was almost 3 times the number of crusts on the exact same equipment that they were when I first walked in the door. And I don't take credit for that. I just gave the team the tools, the team ran with them. But this becomes an extremely powerful tool to use for the team. And furthermore, and I give you references of the people. I remember the sales rep came in because the person that hired me wanted them to come in and tell me to tell them what was wrong with their equipment. He walked in and I said, "There's nothing wrong with your equipment. They don't know how to run your equipment." And he laughed and said, "I like this refreshing change." And he and I became friends over the years, because what happened was we changed how they ran the process and actually ran it the way it was supposed to be run. And it did amazing things, exactly like they sold it to do. And it wasn't anything to do with the vendor. It had everything to do with the operations team. So very powerful tools that you have here. What happens when you get this right, the SOCs, it starts to frame up how you run the line, and it gives you a very structured process between the SOPs and SOCs. So you take a lot of the variability of the operator out. Operators from one shift to the next shift walk in, and all of a sudden they change. I mean, if you've been in the business, you've seen it. They'll walk in, they walk down the line, and they change all the settings to their settings. And it's like the line's been running for 8 hours before you got here, and it was producing great product when you walked in. But yet, because the settings weren't where you want them, you want to change them to your settings, and then all of a sudden you fiddle with it for how long just to get it back to where it should be, but it was already there. So this takes a lot of it off the table, because if it's in the SOCs, the rule is you don't change it. It's running good product and the standard operating conditions are being met, you don't change it. So it starts to really push back to the team as to what really is going on and stabilize the process. As you want to make a process better, you have to standardize a process, you stabilize the process, and then you can start to optimize the process. This is in that stabilization, standardization, and stabilization process. Next slide, please. So the next piece to this 3-layer of improvement is troubleshooting guides. Now, I have seen manuals before that come from the vendors that have some troubleshooting in there, but again, usually extremely technical. What we've seen is that they're never referenced until there's a critical problem. It's always referenced by a maintenance person, never by a line operator. So what that drives to is all of a sudden, from a manufacturer or from a production standpoint, is every time something goes wrong with the line, the first instinct that the operations people have is call maintenance. And what a burden that is on the maintenance. How many maintenance people is it you get in your building every day, and how many stay around? I mean, golly, maintenance is probably the most critical role right now to hire for. Everything's tough, but maintenance is really tough. So you don't want to have them running around like chickens with their heads cut off. You need to give them some relief from that. And the way you do that is get the operators to do certain things first. So the troubleshooting guide often just gives the operations team some layers of response and some ways to go see it. And I look at it as the kind of list of usual suspects. It's a dynamic list that changes over time. It changes with age of equipment. But you'll see that if this standard operating condition is not being met, why? Why is that? Or if I'm having this type of mechanical issue or dough issue or whatever in the process, what could drive that mechanically? And then it gives a list of things for the operator to go through, and they go through and actually diagnose the problem. Was it this? Go check this setting. Is this setting accurate? Okay, next thing. And you can go, it could be as many as 1 item on the list. It could be as many as, I've seen 15 or 20 items on a list before, just for the operator to check. Then once they've checked their pieces, usually the supervisor comes and they call their supervisor at that point. And then the supervisor comes over and they do the check of just verify that everything that the person said they did was accurate. And then they may have a couple more pieces in there that they can look into that might be a little more technical, a little more deep. It may need a little bit more knowledge around the equipment. But then once they've satisfied the fact that they haven't solved the problem and it still exists, then they can call the next technical resource. A lot of times that's maintenance. But at that point, when maintenance walks up and they walk up and they go, did you do your troubleshooting guide? Yes. Okay, good. Then I know that stuff's checked the box, done. I don't need to go dig into those things. Let's dig into what the problem is and get to the real issue. And it seems to, when it's mature and it's doing what it's supposed to do, it expedites the process. But the other thing it does is when maintenance gets there and they can't solve it, then they start to go back to the vendor before just all of a sudden, this isn't running the way it's supposed to run, and call the vendor because, the equipment's obviously the problem. Like I walked into at the pizza company. That wasn't anybody's fault of the pizza company. The people on the floor were never given the reins to run the line the way they should have. And I think that's what this does, is it gives these 3 layers of components, give the people at the floor level the ability to manage and run the process for themselves, ownership. And I think that, again, as you look into this selling of this equipment, you have a stake in that from the beginning, and you have the opportunity to really get into the team and work with the team to help them see these tools as resources, maybe giving them templates. And again, I can share offline some of these templates and give you an idea how to structure them, but they're really basic, they're really simple, oftentimes very visual. Numbers are numbers. I don't care if you speak Spanish or you speak English or you speak whatever language. Most of the time, numbers are universal and understood between the groups. So you don't have to get too crazy with that. Again, the nomenclature of this piece of equipment and this specific component becomes common to everybody because it's on a list and everybody calls it the same thing. So, a widget is a widget and a doodad's a doodad's, and it becomes much more fundamental to the team. But it's a very detailed process when it's done, and it can take a year, maybe more, to fully vet out and get fully developed. And I don't say that you as a vendor would stay engaged that long in the process, but you would probably be a resource to it. And I would encourage, as you go do follow-up conversations with these teams, to ask how it's going and is there anything you can do or your team can do to resolve these things. These companies experience this stuff every day, and when they start to see vendors like that are really engaged in asking the right questions, it's a small industry. We move around. I've moved a bunch of careers in my days already, and I can tell you there's a handful of folks out there that I would lean on every day to come back to, and I would trust, no matter who they work for, to come and bid on a project for me, because I believe in them, because they have the right mentality around this. So bringing these things to the table helps quite a bit. Next slide, please. So there's other tools out there. I've spoken to this before and shared some insight into it. We use, and I've used it at the last company, and I'm currently using at this company, a software program called Red Zone. It's a productivity software. It's really good at using the people at the floor to problem code issues that arise. Now, this is not a CMM. It is a operational efficiency metric tool. It measures OEE, which is overall equipment effectiveness. It uses 3 components to measure that. It uses productivity, performance, and quality. I can get into those. I'd encourage you to look them up. You may have seen it in the food industry. That's getting more prevalent out there. There's other versions, other companies that are doing it. I find Red Zone to be the most interactive for the team members and seems to be the most functional for us. But it's a really nice tool to give these diagnostic and communication processes right to the operator level. I get messages all the time on my iPad specific to what's going on the floor, and I can look out there and see it. So, but what it does is for you guys, and I've used this before when we were buying a piece of equipment at the pizza company and we were using Red Zone, and I went in and the company comes back and they go, well, we say our piece of equipment is reliable to this degree. All right, well, guess what? I have another one of those on my floor, and we've been trending them for 4 years now on Red Zone. Let me look that up. And we come back and I'm able to tell them, well, you're actually pretty close, and I think it's actually a little better than what you're selling it at in this certain circumstance. And we gave them, they were shocked when I validated their information and asked for a copy of it because they wanted to see how we presented it, and I shared it with them, of course. So this tool becomes really powerful in the fact of, if you're using this piece of equipment across multiple lines, or you have, you're looking at expanding or using the same thing, you can leverage this to help push back to where the failure points are on the equipment, if there is such a thing, are trending, or you can also use it to validate when they say this is what it's capable of. And you can actually get the capability, and you can filter out things like operator error. You can filter out things like lack of materials or other things that would cause unplanned downtime that's not relevant to the mechanical aspect of the equipment. So really, really powerful tool out there. And I've been using it, like I said, for 7 years at Palermo's almost, and now a year at Mel-O-Cream. So it's a great, great tool. The last thing I'll say, and this is just a final thought on this, is, and I was talking to an engineer at Palermo's just on Monday. I called him up and kind of was walking through some of these ideas that I had for this and making sure I wasn't missing anything. And he brought up one really great thing, and he said, you know, we put this new bakery process in. It was the last project I was involved in at Palermo's. I left just prior to installation. They were just getting started to install, and I felt terrible, but you know, we had the opportunity to buy this company, and timing is tough sometimes. So they executed, team did a great job, and they complimented me on one thing, that I pulled a couple vendors in, and these vendors, no names to give in this format, but he was so impressed with them, and it was because of their follow-up. He said it's refreshing to see salespeople and VPs and presidents and owners of company calling months after with no mechanical issues and telling them, hey, you know, how's things going? Can I stop by and see it? I'm in the area. That to them went a million miles. Then not long ago, one of them came back and said, we have a mechanical failure on a piece of equipment just like yours, and we only put this piece in 2 places. Yours is one of them. We need to change it immediately. We don't, and they're like, well, we're not having any issues with it. And they said, we don't care, it's on us. We need to do it. We will do it at your schedule, at our cost. And they were able to coordinate it. So rather than waiting for something to fail and then reacting to it, they were proactive. And it wasn't something catastrophic that would cause a failure that would hurt somebody or damage anything. It would just cause downtime. They still called up and told them that this is a problem. We want to take care of it before it became an issue for the operations team, which is, you know, in today's world, minutes are dollars. So they were really impressed with that. I was glad to hear that was the case. So, you know, that engagement, remember I told you earlier, this is a marriage. There's a lot of communication involved in this, and the marriages go on for years and years. So just because you finish the sale doesn't mean you walk away. And I think a lot of places, unfortunately, they get so busy and so caught up in their world, they forget to just do those quick follow-ups, even once in a while, just to follow up with people and make sure things are still going well. I remember reading when I was a young man, Lee Iacocca's book, and you know, after the sale, he'd always send birthday cards still, and he'd send something to these people that bought cars from him. And you know what he got? He got a lot of repeat sales out of that. So I think that that art is almost lost today for a lot of folks. And I think if you have new training going on for new salespeople or new tech people, get them engaged at that level. They need to know that that's still important. This personal relationship is not all about you know, what you can communicate via email or text message. You need to actually boots on the ground or make phone calls and talk to people. So, all right, next slide. I think that's what I had to present today. I just ask if there's any questions or anything I can do to expand on any ideas there.
So let's open the floor up to any questions that people might have. Well, that might come in if anyone has any questions. Chad, my question for you, with all your experience and project knowledge and with the technologies that you've recommended here, has there ever been an installment where it just everything went off the hitch, or the opposite? Have you ever had one where it just went kaboom?
Well, yeah, nothing ever off the hitch. We're always able, you know, you have a dynamic team generally involved between the operations group that's installing or putting it in, me being the customer, my team, and the team of the vendors. Now, what we have seen is lack of communication, project creep, cost creep, time creep. That gets frustrating and for everyone. But you know, we always overcome. Maybe not always on budget, maybe not always on time. But we've always overcome the problems and never had something not work completely. Not yet, anyhow.
And now that you're an owner, as well as in operations, has your perspective changed at all from where you were before?
Oh, thanks. That's a good question. No, not really. I've always had high expectations. You know, I think part of it is just really, and I was fortunate in my career to have the opportunity to build a team around me that I needed to be successful. And I think that's the key is that the team around me has always been very solid and able to handle a lot of these things. I have a master's in project management, as I stated before, and it's been good to have that just because I can call out the things that I see as going wrong in a project from a high level, and it just or asking people to think differently about how they approach things. So really, my perspective hasn't changed a lot. I think I just have more skin in the game now.
That's great. I don't see any questions coming in, so I don't know if we want to end it or, oh, here we go. It says, Chad, great insights. With the ongoing pandemic affecting travel schedules, what virtual or electronic engagements have you seen that have been impactful?
Yeah, so I mean, we always, especially in the larger operations, have spent a little bit extra for that online like interaction. So the vendor can plug into our equipment to see what's going on with the PLC or in the electronic controls. So that's been a big piece of it. But also anymore with phones, it's amazing. I see people FaceTiming all the time on the floor because it's alive. It's right now in the moment versus trying to set up this formal call on a webinar or something. So and like I said, one of the things with Red Zone is it runs on an iOS system, so it runs all Apple, and you can do short video clips. So a lot of times what I'll see is the people on the floor will actually do a small video clip, attach it to a problem, an issue. We have what you can call, they're called issues. You can post it on an issue, say, here's my problem I'm seeing, here's a small video clip, or here's a picture with arrows and circles and notes on it. So then that can be taken by the maintenance person, the operations person, and sent straight to the vendor, and they can actually see what's going on. So the technology with this social media and the things that we use in our hands every day, it's becoming almost impossible not to be able to see the problem live, even if you can't be there.
Oh, great. The next question, does the Red Zone software tie directly into your maintenance management system?
No, it does not. They have their own program they're working on, and I'd say that's one of the things that we were kind of critical of it, is that it does not interface. The problem is the CMMs have there's so many versions out there. Picking one platform would be hard. So Red Zone is trying to develop a module within their software that would provide CMM. I don't really think it's there yet personally, and I'm not knocking their software. Like I said, I've used it for 8 years. I love it, but it's not quite what I would expect. They have good parts to it. It definitely drives interaction, very much like the metrics for the process operations, but it doesn't get into the nuts and bolts of parts inventory, cost around projects, downtime costs to that project, or tying back to the maintenance aspect alone. It just kind of lumps all that into the big picture downtime event. So it doesn't do that. It does not interface with the ERP system either. So it doesn't take the cost of downtime or any of the things that go on the floor and apply those straight to the ERP system. It's really a standalone process.
Great. Any more questions from the group? Oh, looks like no more questions from everybody. Well, Chad, I'd like to thank you so much for presenting here today. I know we were going to meet you at an annual conference and that got canceled, and so hopefully in the future everyone will get a chance to connect with you.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm much better live, I assure you. I enjoy doing these things when I get to see the room and talk to the people and see their faces. So, but I appreciate everybody's time today, and I hope it took some value from it.
Well, thank you, and everyone will send the recording out via email after the webinar. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.